this before and I will again. My favorite band of all time was Nirvana. Um, and my favorite song by them was Frances Farmer Will Have Her Revenge on Seattle. And I remember when I said I was 11, but I think I was actually 13. I think it was like 13. And back then, the public library, you could rent CDs from the library. And I was able to rent In Utero, and that was my favorite album of all time, and it still is a top one. And um, I still remember this. I was in this room because I live with my mother again because of these people. Well, no, it's not because of these people. I was going to move back anyway, but I was not able to fix up my mom's house like I wanted to because of these people. That's true. And also, the wall color I have, I wouldn't have picked this color. It's like a weird baby bubblegum pink. And what I wanted was like a salmon color, not like super salmon, but more like a pink that's distinctly salmon hued. But because of my condition, I couldn't really like dedicate time to picking the right color. So I just blindly picked one and it's completely the wrong color I wanted. But that doesn't matter, does it? I wanted like a salmon, warm toned pink. I don't like the cool toned pink at all. It looks very babyish, but what are you going to do? Anyway, yeah, so but I remember this was still our room, except then I shared it with my sister. Even though I was the oldest, I was always the weakest. And we had drundle beds, and she had the top drundle bed, and I would sleep on the floor. The drundle bed didn't work, so I had to sleep on the floor on a mattress. And I remember I would lay on the drundle bed on the floor with my kitten. I remember my kitten. His name was Oreo. He was black and white. He was a cow cat. He was a cow cat with no tail, and he had extra dew claws. And Oreo didn't like anyone but me. And he was a wild boy, this kitten. I think I took him from his mom. When I was a little kid, I used to be a cat lord. I'm still a cat lord. But while I was working as a nurse, I had no pets. Um, but I've always loved cats the most, and I also like dogs, obviously, but like I'm mostly a cat person. Anyway, when I was a little kid, I used to go try to get the kittens in the yard, and there are things like when I was little, I didn't know, like I took kittens too young from their mother. I hope those kittens, I don't know what happened to them, but I gave them away to people. Back then, there weren't scumbags in Bayonne, just decent family people for the most part. Um, I remember one of the kittens I gave to this like Puerto Rican kid. He seemed like a nice person. He was like, "Oh my God, I have a kitten," but I don't remember what I did with the other ones. Anyway, that was a mistake. I took them from their mom too young. They could eat, but they still needed help going to the bathroom, and I was too little to know. And what's amazing is my cat Oreo, who I also took from the yard, he started helping with the kittens because I took like three or four. I didn't know why I did. I don't know what I was going to do with them. I was like 11. And he started helping by cleaning the kittens so they'd go to the bathroom. And I didn't know you had to do that. But like his instincts took over and he did that, even though he was a boy cat. But then it was weird because even though Oreo was caring for the kittens and cleaning them, occasionally he'd bite them. Not super hard, but he'd like go. Oreo was a weird boy, man. Anyway, Oreo was a cow cat. He was white with a black mask on his head with a point like that, and he had like a black spot on his middle and his tail. He had no tail. It was a little stub by birth. and that was black, so that's why he was Oreo, because his head was black, his tail was black, and just cream filling in the middle, right? Bro literally looked like an Oreo because of the nature of how he was a cow cat. He just had one black spot in his chest, right? He was mostly white. I remember lying in that trundle bed, and when Oreo was a kid, he'd sleep on my chest. I loved Oreo. He died when I was like 27. I didn't take him with me to my first apartment because Oreo was so wild, he demanded to go outside. He refused to be an indoor only cat. The cats I have now are total sweeties. Like, they don't mind being house cats, but Oreo, he was like, Oreo was like Bandit in the sense, even though I made him a house cat, he never really wanted to be one. So every time we'd have the screen door open, he'd escape until eventually it was just like, all right, he's telling us he's going to go out and come back. And that's just what he did his whole life. So that's why I didn't take him in my apartment, because the boy was mostly an outside cat, right? He didn't want to be a house cat. So I left him here with my mom, and then he died. He got really sick, and we took him to the vet to go to sleep. I remember crying over that. I remember feeling stupid for crying because he was dead. Now I realize that's completely normal. At the time, I thought there was something wrong with me. Anyway, so yeah, I was talking about how I got in utero from the public library when I rented the CDs. And over there was a TV with a PlayStation 1, which I loved. And to play the CDs, because we didn't have a CD player, I used the PlayStation to play it. Because you could play CDs on your PlayStation, right? And I remember thinking this is the best thing I ever heard in my motherfucking life. I couldn't even fucking believe it. And my favorite song was always Francis Farmer. And this is why I say I believe there's more to this life. Because what are the odds that would be like a transformative song in my life? And that would literally happen to me. Literally, what happened to her happened to me. So, Kurt Cobain was an empathetic person, not performative. There's a big difference between performative empathy and real empathy, but he was actually, they say it all the time, but it's actually true. It's not one of those things they make up. You know, to like these days, celebrities are all so fake. They're just Illuminati cult members. A lot of them are little bankers' daughters, like Taylor Swift. But back then, they used to get real people from the population who had some talents. And so the shit they say about them was often true versus today, where they just make shit up and like they're a system creation with very connected relatives. But, you know, back then it was common for somebody to get famous who actually was talented, and then they'd come to them and make them famous. And so a lot of the stuff they said about them was not a pure lie, unlike today, right? Because today they're all Nepo babies. Whereas back then it was a combination of Nepo babies, system plants, and real talented people, unlike today's celebrity. Um, yeah, so what happened to her is literally what happened to me. Like, she was an actress who was somewhat successful, and she got recruited by this lady in New York called Rosenstein to join the Communist Party. And she went to the USSR and she started to get really into leftism, right? And this was, I think, in the late 30s. And then as her career took off, she, of course, had to hide she was a communist, right? So whenever she'd be asked, she'd announce she's a communist. But she always had themes of leftism in her movies, and she was a leftist her whole life. And her mom was this really crazy fucking piece of shit. And she would publicly say shit like, I'd rather my daughter be dead than be a communist. You know. So yeah, so she's like making movies and being successful, and everyone knows she's a leftist, and sometimes she make movies with leftist themes. Anyway, so then the conspiracy starts to label her crazy because she's a communist, right? Because the Illuminati did not want any leftist influence in Hollywood, right? So the Illuminati went and made a conspiracy against her, and they got cops to say she's crazy. They got people to like say that she's irrational. And this became the fodder for throwing her in the psych ward in Seattle, right? And there to punish her, they put her on the worst floor in the worst psych ward, right? And it was like basically a really bad prison with really bad conditions. She was basically tortured there and raped repeatedly all the time, and everyone she knew helped, you know. So like now that she was in this vulnerable position in a psych ward, like people she knew would just visit and rape her, shit like this. And she lived like that for years, and finally was released, and was just obviously very fucked up and died at 50. And isn't that funny? That's what would happen to my life, right? I got targeted by the Illuminati related to social general plots. And during the height of CIA created social justice, CIA created social justice to stop real leftism, because that's what social justice is about. The mainstream popularized corporate social justice movement was always to thwart leftism, to elevate identity politics outside of class, which enables creating a sort of fascist psychology amongst so called progressives where they look for scapegoats, right? So they're not looking for actual oppressors, they're not actually making equity, they're not actually asking for real material social changes that would create equity, but aligning with billionaires in finding people to hate. And invariably, it's going to be something like me, like that white woman is an oppressor. And it's like, I'm a registered nurse. And suddenly I take on the sins of the eternal Jew or the eternal Nazi in this case. And they make up a lie. I'm like a secret oppressor, always getting people. So they make up a conspiracy to basically do the same thing, throw me a psych ward and rape me, right? And here we are. It's been going on for 3 years, right? So it's kind of amazing that like that would resonate with me and that would happen to me, right? I mean, other than showing that women have the worst life on earth and the real order of social power is class above all else, then sex. Men always have it easier than women. It's a complete confabulation. That is not the case. Race is a third. And the fact there are points in history where race was the number one does not change the fact that's how it is today, right? And how it usually is, by the way. So, like, what makes the Southern slavery so significant is that this was a really weird society where race trumped everything. The lowest, poorest white was, by definition, better than a black person, right? But even in the South during slavery, they had like hubs of free blacks and they had like mulatto families who were high status. They had all kinds of shit going on. But for the most part in that society, race was the thing. Race determined your class. The poorest white person was better than a black person, generally speaking, right? But that is usually not the case in society, is not the case in society today. Um, Wealth determines your class now. A wealthy black person is many, many, many times more powerful and important than a poor white person. Next is sex, definitely. Sex, like women have it worse than men of their class. So you can look at someone like this is what they do. They encourage them to look at someone like Caroline Levin and say, this white bitch, she has all the power. And in reality, not really. Like considering her class, considering she's part of the wealthy MAGA class, she has the shittiest job. Her job is to stand there and get hate for what these guys are doing. That's her job, right? Same with Biden's press secretary. They had a black woman. I forget what her name was. Her job was to stand there and take hate from rednecks. That's a shitty job. That's a job they give a woman, right? While the men actually do all the shit. Yeah, so it's sex, it's class first, then sex, then race. But they what they did CIA did was inverse the order of these operations. So they made people think nothing is worse than race. Race determines everything. And sex is not really true because what if you're a white woman? You actually have all the power now. And class, we don't have to care about that. So they did all that to make them psychologically fascist to enable shit like what happened to me, right? Anyway, yeah, it's the same in the sense the Illuminati was terrified of leftism then and terrified of leftism now and scapegoating women. Isn't that funny? Like, that's really not, even though she was a communist and I was labeled a Nazi, which I'm not, I'm a leftist. Um, the origin of why we were both destroyed is the Illuminati paranoid of leftism. That's the origin. Like, the reason I was targeted is not because I'm a Nazi, it's because they want to destroy progressivism. The same reason she was targeted. So we were targeted the same way. It doesn't matter what we're labeled because these are lies, just like we're not crazy. It doesn't matter if they said that, "Oh, she's a very dangerous communist," and or if they said about me, "You're a Nazi." None of it's true, right? The real reason is they need to make scapegoat plots and makes examples of people and thwart leftism. That remains true of the Illuminati just as much as torturing women does. And yeah, it's kind of interesting that stuff like that makes you think that there's more to this world, right? What are the odds? That would be my favorite song, and that would be my fate. And that's why he named his daughter Frances as well.